Hello and welcome, dear friends. I'm Svyatoslav Dubyanskiy. I'm delighted to have Imram Giri as my guest once again. Good afternoon, Imram. Jai Sai Ram. Welcome, everyone. Sai Ram, let us continue our discussions. This is another episode in what has become a substantial series. We have already filmed several episodes and plan to continue filming more. They focus on the fundamental principles of Kriya Yoga. The topic we are addressing is quite extensive, and I'm pleased that you always delve so deeply into the matters we discuss. In previous episodes, we explored Kachari Mudra and Sambhavi Mudra. Those discussions were not only fascinating, but also resonated strongly with our audience. However, we didn't cover everything. Today, I'd like to address another aspect we recently discussed during a private conversation, the topic of information hygiene. What kind of information should a practitioner allow into their mind, and how can one identify information that might warrant a polite thank you but no? The truth is, you can attend a seminar on Kriya Yoga and master all the techniques. But if your consciousness becomes, for lack of a better phrase, a chaotic dumping ground for unchecked information, the effectiveness of these techniques, be it Kriya Yoga, mantra practices, or others, could be greatly diminished. Because a consciousness cluttered with false concepts creates significant obstacles to genuine spiritual growth. The first question I want to raise is far from simple. I've referred to false concepts, and I can't help but smile with mild horror at the thought. How does one distinguish between concepts that are false and those that are true? Separate the wheat from the chaff, as Master Jesus once said. Information surrounds us like an ocean, yet true knowledge is but a handful of crumbs. People are offered everything. You've probably noticed this yourself. The overwhelming number of books on yoga are available today. I even remember how back in the 90s a complete encyclopedia of yoga was published, and I found it ridiculous. It boldly claimed, here you will find everything you need to reach certain levels. A whole encyclopedia of yoga promising it all. It was rather absurd. And honestly, I don't even know who published it, though it hardly matters. Of course, I never bothered reading it. But what does a complete encyclopedia of yoga really mean? This suggests that all divine knowledge has been compressed into this book. Everything concerning our world and all other realms, cosmic consciousness and the spiritual realms. It claims to include everything. This, of course, is a regrettable misconception. A vast amount of information is now at our fingertips. Anyone who is willing can write a book. However, only few authors genuinely and sincerely refer to primary sources, offering their insights while frankly stating that this is their personal opinion. Their works can be really worth reading. I know you have written many valuable books that deserve to be read. They are rooted in what truly exists, with references to primary sources. An important aspect here is the honest transmission of information. This is true knowledge that can and must be preserved for future generations. Today, there is an overwhelming amount of pseudo and false teachings. The most disheartening part is witnessing how the West, for example, dissects yoga, fabricates its own concepts, and labels them with incomprehensible terms. They extract what they deem useful, stripping away or completely severing the essential spiritual aspects, leaving only a practical shell that in most cases fails to deliver, often distorting the original teachings. Naturally, this represents a significant problem. Why do people fall for this? Because as individuals driven by ego, they crave quick results. Few are willing to commit to long-term self-development. I've encountered people who boast, "What yogis achieved in 10 years, I can teach you in 5 minutes." The question is why? It's a reflection of the epoch we live in. The levels of consciousness are different now. As a result, people often end up wasting time and potentially money as well. Time is an irreplaceable resource, and regaining lost time requires certain means of compensation, acceleration, and deep immersion. While this possibility always exists, a person must truly understand what they are doing and their goal. This is why a pursuit of truth through genuine knowledge is what ultimately saves us on this path. Moreover, this same knowledge enables a person to discern whether it's worth engaging with endless videos or bizarre clips that flood their attention. It's very harmful for the brain. I would call it dirt or even evil. Some may argue and say, this is our life. But the question remains, who imposes this system, this fashion, this symbolism, and all these distractions into our lives in the first place? That is why I begin some of my lectures with a crucial question. People ask me, where should one start with yoga? I reply, one must consciously approach the spiritual path or yoga, starting with dehypnotization. The first step is the dehypnotization of consciousness. People are hypnotized, their frequencies have been lowered, and they easily fall for the meaningless information propagated through the media. All of this is tied with the principle of the matrix, the illusion, or Maya, which is now very active. And how does it work? Through attachments. It functions through a vast web of deception that generates more and more attachments. Take iPhones, for example, the 10th, 11th, 12th, and now the 13th. It may seem like a trivial example, but it's highly illustrative. People may fall into extremes over something as seemingly mundane as a phone. This is what we call dependency, which develops at the neural level. Dehypnotization involves pausing and making a conscious effort to lift these blinkers, open the mind, and let go of the delusions imposed on one's consciousness. This involves adopting a proper diet, cultivating the right attitude, practicing yoga, particularly Kriya yoga, and cleansing the body. It also requires letting go of certain attachments, such as reducing reliance on devices like phones, computers, or even the internet. A child who can no longer live without these devices fails to see who they really are. They are immersed in a network that continuously shapes and reshapes their consciousness. There should be days dedicated to solitude, entirely free from phones. Their influence is very harmful and damaging. Most importantly, it pulls a person away from their higher self, from God. This is the insidious work of what many call the devil or Satan. What you call it doesn't matter. What matters is that this mechanism is functioning effectively. The most dangerous thing is that people don't believe in it. The greatest accomplishment of the so-called architect of the universe, or the forces of cosmic illusion, what some refer to as unholy power, is their success in creating conditions where people don't believe they exist. When you try to explain to some people that these forces are leading them astray, they argue, no, we're doing this consciously, we're in control of everything. It's like an alcoholic who has reached an advanced stage of dependency, yet insists, no, I can quit any time I want. But they don't quit because in their understanding, it already feels impossible. Of course, this is deeply harmful. You know, in my opinion, when we ask such a complex question, what is true teaching? What is false? The danger lies in the very act of positioning ourselves above others as if we are the ones to decide. However, let's not place ourselves above anyone, as we do not intend to do so. Instead, let's simply examine the criteria. What is true teaching? True teaching is the one that recognizes that every person is divine. Moreover, both the Bible and the Vedas clearly state we are created in the image and likeness of God. If that is the case, how can we be sinful or worthless? Such a teaching is in essence absurd. Therefore, any teaching, whether based on Christian, Sufi, Islamic, Buddhist, or New Age spiritual systems, it's irrelevant, conveys the fundamental truth. You are divine, you are beautiful, you are whole. You have come into this world to fulfill your purpose. This world, in truth, is not a world of suffering. One of the most pervasive ideas is that this world is a place of suffering, a kind of mess, filled with conspiracies at every turn. God created this world to be a place of creativity, happiness, and bliss, much like the Garden of Eden. It is our own perception and understanding of reality that give rise to suffering and nightmares. So when it comes to distinguishing between false and true teachings, I would put it this way. Kriya Yoga is not tied to any particular religion and can be practiced by Muslims, Jews, Christians, or people who are not religious at all. After all, Yogananda commented on the Bhagavad Gita, the New Testament, and the works of Omar Khayyam. What we see is that Kriya Yoga is a universal spiritual system, one that existed long before the establishment of any religion. This means that true information that needs to be consciously absorbed does not necessarily come from the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads. No. It can come from any book, whether it was published last week or thousands of years ago. It's important to read the New Testament or the Quran without prejudice. These texts speak of the Supreme Lord, and they are indeed magnificent. Whether ancient or modern, it's irrelevant. If it tells you that you are divine, complete, infinite, and beautiful, then this is genuine truth. How you call it, Buddhism, psychology, New Age, esotericism, or any other, matters little. Undoubtedly, it is vital to have solid spiritual and moral foundations. This is also very important. Correct information is based on important principles. But consider this. When we practice meditation and dissolve into the divine consciousness, merging with the state of unity and the vibrations of love, we naturally evolve into human beings, with a capital B, who are inherently concerned with questions of morality and ethics. And this is not a mere list of duties. Rather, it is the natural outcome of meditation. It is crucial to understand that spiritual and moral values are not merely a checklist of rules that, frankly, few people will ever follow. They are the natural result of meditation and immersion in unity. Yes, this is the true fruit of spiritual practice, an organic outcome. These are, in essence, the general criteria for the information we choose to absorb, whether through books, videos, or seminars. Some information can be destructive, and it is best to decline it, saying, "Thank you, I'm not really interested." At times, it may even be necessary to assert that we simply do not need it. After all, we shouldn't always remain silent. Regardless, the information we absorb, consciously or not, shapes the model of reality we inhabit. The model of reality is a significant historical, psychological, and sociological concept. In essence, my model of reality dictates how I experience the world. It's clear then that objective reality is not truly objective at all. Rather, it is shaped by the internal model of reality that we have. We are now in 2020, and looking ahead, the years 2021 and likely 2022 will present numerous challenges, putting people to the test and forcing them to reload. Yes. Someone creates a nightmarish model of reality based on conspiracies involving unknown forces. However, those who practice meditation recognize that the true power governing the world is not a secret global government, but God. Absolutely. The real rulers of this world are not shadowy oligarchs whose names we do not even know. It is the Mahatmas and Mahasiddhas, the ministers of God, who govern all things. Consider the difference in models of reality that can exist within us. It all depends on the information we choose to absorb. Today, there are many esoteric practitioners, astrologers, and conspiracy theorists who weave narratives that create a model of reality immersing you in suffering. This raises an important question of hygiene. Hygiene that goes beyond simply washing our hands. I'm talking about information hygiene. To study the practice of meditation and then immerse yourself in a depressive model of reality serves no purpose. It's absolutely meaningless. So I would like to ask you, how can we build a correct model of reality? Sai Baba once said that since the advent of television, people have started to degrade at a faster rate. Many saints in their time predicted the future, though I can't provide exact quotes or names. But they spoke of seeing a time when living pictures would hang on the walls. People would watch these images, and they would be the wiles of the devil, fostering the degradation of humanity. Today we watch these living pictures on the walls, plasma televisions. This represents 90% of the encoding done by those who aim to capture and redirect all our attention towards themselves. This is a form of programming, and this is where you need to begin. You must begin by completely removing any connections to the things that distract you. To truly understand this, a person must first define the purpose of their life, why they are living. Without a clear purpose, it will be difficult to discern whether they really need this television. I'm not advocating for a complete withdrawal from the world. What I am saying is that there are people who have set a goal for their life. They know what it is, and they are moving towards it. If that goal is a lofty one, it justifies the means. Anything that hinders the pursuit of that goal must be removed. Otherwise, reaching it will be impossible. When it comes to spiritual practice, I can confidently say that even basic sadhana helps a person develop stability, preventing them from falling victim to this encoding. The terms hypnosis and delusion have been replaced by encoding, and this is essentially the case. Fundamentally, the meaning remains unchanged, at least for me. At a certain stage, a unique quality begins to manifest within the individual. This power is known as siddhi. One such siddhi is the ability to discern, known as viveka. When you observe a person, or listen to someone, or hear something, you begin to clearly discern the source of their actions or words. You start to understand where it's coming from. You grasp the etiology of their intentions, feeling and seeing things more clearly. These are aspects of clairvoyance, the workings of your soul and higher consciousness. Through this, you begin to understand the world, recognizing where the true essence lies. Stability in spiritual practice is essential, as it is through this practice that you are shaped. I often use the analogy of a fish swimming in water that doesn't know what water is. The fish is in its natural environment, of which it is an integral part. It doesn't think, I am a fish and this is water. I am distinct from the water. They are one whole. We exist within God. He is the essence of our world, but there are forces attempting to pull us out of this natural state. Those who lack stability are more susceptible to such influences. To accelerate this disconnection, numerous methods have been devised that target human consciousness, including the use of chemical substances widely distributed today. They act like a form of drug. Many medical conditions play a role here. You understand what I'm talking about. These are deliberate attempts to distract individuals from discovering their essence. However, a person who diligently practices, prays, meditates, and does their best, no matter how imperfectly, is still aligned with the greater truth. Such an individual will never be forsaken or left in despair, because we have never died. The human soul is eternal. It was never born. It has always existed, because the human soul is the Creator Himself. This is a part of the Creator. Being part of the Creator, the soul is untouched by mortality. It will never die. It always exists, just as the Creator always exists. As part of the Creator, we have never truly died. We did not come into existence, nor will we cease to exist. This is the nature of the soul. It is immortal. This brings us to an important point, the concept of jiva. As we discussed previously, it is formed only because the soul attracts the elements that shape jiva, enriching itself in the process. These elements originate from space and ultimately from the earth. As stated in the Quran, from clay we will create you. All of you. We are those who act as conduits for the Creator's will, working in harmony. People sometimes ask me, why does the Quran use, "we have done this, we have done that," when there is the Creator who does it? Why we? The way I see it, we reflects the Creator's nature as encompassing an innumerable multitude of His children, who shape this world as one unified whole. This is my personal understanding, and I do not seek to impose it on anyone. When we recognize our immortality and see ourselves as integral parts of God, we can never be blinded again. Are there any forces that could alter our attitude or our consciousness? There aren't. Unless, of course, we lose touch with the divine or give up spiritual practice. This is the foundation of our existence. It's true, there are many pseudo-teachers around us. Perhaps some might even consider me one. It's their right. Absolutely, both you and me. And I respect that. But there are clear criteria by which one can discern whether someone is a deceiver or a genuine teacher. Consider the following. A false teacher is primarily focused on creating certain conditions to draw people to themselves. They rely on persuasion and negotiation, often attempting to perform some form of wonder if they are able. The majority of false teachers who perform these wonders are connected to channels of low astral entities, or demonic forces. These beings are indeed powerful and enable the illusion of so-called wonders. The demon empowers them. People get hooked. These are false teachings. In the Quran and Islam, the performance of wonders is therefore explicitly prohibited, because it can lead people into a state known as karamat, where they lose their sense of self and direction. This is critical. Even swaying is prohibited. For instance, Tibetan monks, when reciting sutras, sway rhythmically back and forth to create a particular cadence. In contrast, Islamic practice requires one to sit upright and disciplined, like the practice of Kriya yoga, to avoid succumbing to delusion. That's the point. False teachings and their distorted variations emerge from egoism. We have already discussed this issue many times. A person is driven by certain needs, likely stemming from an inferiority complex or, to some extent, financial gain. Many people fall prey to these falsehoods because they trust that individual. Sincere people with open hearts can be drawn by that person's magnetism. The individual might speak eloquently, which can amplify their appeal, just as I may sound convincing right now, and they are drawn in. I always emphasize that a true teacher, a genuine guide striving towards God, even if they haven't achieved full self-realization yet, perceives the divinity within each of their disciples, or anyone who regards them as a teacher. This recognition of divinity in others is the fundamental principle of a true teacher. You've rightly observed that in our practice, we aim to foster an environment where individuals can recognize and embrace their own divine nature. The goal is not to create dependency on the teacher, but to enable a person to become fully self-reliant in their divine essence, to guide them to the point where their head reaches towards heaven, symbolizing the realization of their divine nature. As a rule, after interacting with such teachers, people leave feeling inspired and uplifted. They are eager to practice, unafraid of life, and free from aggression towards the world around them. Even if the world is aggressive, they recognize it as part of their alternative reality. But our reality is distinct from theirs. Our reality is different, and it is rooted in the 5 universal human values imparted by Bhagavan: the pursuit of truth, dharma, the law of righteousness, unconditional love, peace, and tranquility, and nonviolence in both thought and action. This is our reality. This is an incredibly powerful force when you realize your immortal nature. When you understand that the body is merely a bubble, and what's inside it is prana, or air. This is the essence of the soul. When the soul dissolves into the spirit, it is as though the bubble bursts and becomes water. Water represents the soul, and the bubble or ice represents the body. Through spiritual practice, the ice melts and transforms into water, symbolizing the soul. The soul is like an ocean, and the ocean is essentially God. It turns out that pseudo-teachers rely solely on their own judgments. They refuse to accept anything beyond their own perspective, isolating themselves and others. They create conditions where people are tethered to them, feeding off their energy. Such teachers often establish ashrams or monasteries. I'm not referring to well-established traditions, but rather to those that gather followers around them, attracting them with a sort of magic, using magic to keep them attached. I know such people. Unfortunately, one can come across them. A genuine teacher is free. People are naturally drawn to them, but their focus is not on attracting others. For instance, Lahiri Mahasaya would sit meditating, and people would gather around him without any deliberate effort on his part. When approached and asked about the essence of true teaching, he would often close his eyes. Similarly, when the Buddha was questioned about nirvana, or the essence of true teaching, he would close his eyes as if advising, practice, turn your attention inward to find your real self. Search for God within. How can you determine whether a teaching is false? One crucial factor is personal experience. If personal experience is lacking, rely on the experience of a master. If you have no master, then turn to ancient scriptures. When the 3 aspects align, you are on the right path. If asked how to verify whether a teaching is true, my advice is to turn to an experienced master. Masters like Lahiri Mahasaya, Yukteswar-Giri, and Yogananda have provided us with holy scriptures and interpretations. They demonstrated that these teachings work and gave us knowledge in its purest form. The Bhagavad Gita, for example, offers valuable insights. We have the teachings of Swami, Gita Vahini, and the Vedas. You can rely on personal practice or experience of masters. How one applies them to their own purposes is a personal matter. A person cannot truly go astray unless they choose to do so. Mistakes arise when someone is motivated solely by their own personal success. The moment an individual becomes preoccupied with personal success, not personal growth, but success driven by the ego, when they become preoccupied with developing superpowers, they begin to drift away from the spiritual path. Superpowers should emerge naturally as an outcome of spiritual practice. But they won't necessarily emerge, right? Yes, you are right. But having them is a good sign. They indicate that you are on the right path. This is a response, a kind of feedback, an indicator. If a person practices but perceives no change, they should not feel discouraged. Instead, they should reconsider their approach, as there may have been some missteps. This calls for greater determination, persistence, and dedication to practice. Then it will bear fruit. Above all, it is essential to appeal to the higher power, not for the acquisition of superpowers, but for the opportunity to progress spiritually. Deception in this matter is impossible. When people claim they accidentally followed a false teacher, it is seldom truly accidental. Lured by the promise of a shortcut and superpowers, they were drawn to that teacher by his animal magnetism without engaging in critical analysis. My master is extraordinary. He can materialize objects. Many sadhus, relatively unknown, can materialize things. There are teachers who can dematerialize. I have attended the Kumbh Mela many times, including the grand event, and once witnessed a Mahasiddha vanish before a crowd's eyes, leaving them confused and scattering in search of him. He was covered with ash, vibhuti. He stepped away on business. Yes, he moved to another dimension to accomplish his task and later reappeared. But that's not the main point here. It is a result, by the way. It's the outcome of his mystical practice. Let me clarify. The mysticism often discussed today and sometimes promoted is not the same as this. No. Mystical practices in their true form are those directly supported by or emerging from the Atman or Paramatman. Mystical practices are rooted in divinity. They arise from this divinity. The so-called mystical practices often discussed today are merely attempts to perform magical acts. Pursuing personal needs or goals is not a spiritual act. It's simply magic. This form of magic exists and is actively used today, especially by deceivers. I must say I agree with much of what you have mentioned, but a couple of points stand out in particular. One of them is the temptation of quick results. Yes, an enormous trap indeed. It manifests in both social and spiritual contexts. In the social sphere, for instance, it drives the desire to get rich quickly. It's a cornerstone of all forms of fraud, like pyramid schemes. Instead of putting in the effort in developing one's own project, one succumbs to the temptation of quick wealth. This desire is exploited by scammers. Similarly, in the spiritual realm, the allure of quick enlightenment is a trap. They claim, why meditate for decades like yogis do? In this new era, instant spiritual transformation is possible. But it's essential to recognize that this is nothing but a trap. The pursuit of quick enlightenment will become a never-ending cycle if you fall for it. This is a crucial point to understand. There is one more important aspect. Another fundamental concept you mentioned is viveka, a Sanskrit term referring to divine discernment between truth and falsehood, between the eternal and the fleeting. One more important aspect is buddhi, meaning the divine intellect. The key ability that the buddhi gives us is the ability of discernment. We could sit here, two intelligent guys, and engage in long discussions about what constitutes true and false teachings. However, if a person possesses inner discernment, viveka, they will immediately recognize the truth when they gain information from a book, video, or seminar. But if a person is incapable of discernment, if they lack viveka, the informational chaos we are talking about will inevitably infiltrate their mind. And what do we see as a result? In all spiritual traditions, one essential part of practice has always been the study of ancient scriptures, in addition to mantra, prayer, and meditation. You've mentioned that ancient texts are an important aspect. For example, Seraphim of Sarov read the New Testament throughout his life. In Sufism, there is a practice of reading the Quran repeatedly, sometimes many times in a row. Many Buddhist schools have the tradition of reciting, or more often, chanting Buddhist sutras. What does this signify? It highlights the importance of information hygiene. When people read genuine ancient teachings of great masters, avatars, and prophets, allowing profound wisdom to enter their lives. For example, in Christianity and Judaism, ancient prayers like the Psalms, traditionally attributed to the prophet David, were developed and refined over thousands of years. Actually, only half of them were actually written by him. The ancient vibrations embedded in these words continue to possess immense power. This leads me to another question. In many schools, though not necessarily the majority, it is common to restrict the course materials to the specific traditions of that school. This is our tradition. You are encouraged to read only the books we recommend. Let me put it this way, without intending to criticize anyone. For instance, if you visit the Orthodox Church, any priest will typically recommend certain books. There is even a rule that if a book is marked as blessed by the patriarch, it is considered acceptable for reading. If it is not marked as such, then it is generally not recommended. For example, members of SRF are spiritual descendants of Dhyamata. I am specifically referring to Dhyamata, not Yogananda. There are strict guidelines stating that only texts published by SRF itself are considered appropriate for study. For me, this is truly astonishing. If the material is not published by SRF, it is forbidden to read it, as doing so will result in expulsion. There are numerous instances of this nature. My teacher, Yogi Ramaya, used to say, "Be open." He knew that I was deeply interested in Christianity, Buddhism, and especially in Satya Sai, as I was an interpreter for Satya Sai. Yogi Ramaya found it fascinating. If one has a spiritual core, one should feel free to explore any information that enriches them. Naturally, this should be done through the prism of viveka, which cannot be attained easily, but must be cultivated over time. How do you personally approach the interaction with those who come to you to learn Kriya Yoga? What guidance do you offer them? Do you provide them with a list of recommended literature? Or do you give them the freedom to read whatever they choose? Are there any specific criteria you follow? I understand that it might be much easier to simply restrict people, providing them with a list of 10 books that are thoroughly vetted, carefully swept from minds, so to speak. If you allow them the freedom to explore everything, there's always the risk of encountering something unexpected. What is your approach? How can one balance spiritual freedom with viveka? We encourage reading your books. Then that's enough. That's the right way to go. When people ask what they should read as part of the seminar program, I naturally suggest all the books by Sai Baba, all the works of Yogananda, and your books that we have available in our resources. Of course, I encourage reading the books I know and trust, like the Vedas. Everything related to Kriya Yoga, everything related to spiritual practice and similar topics is recommended. If someone asks whether they can read the Quran, I say, of course you can. But read it properly from right to left, not from left to right, as we are used to. This is a metaphor, of course, meaning that one should approach it from the right perspective. It's worth reading. There are certain authors whose books I am often asked about, though I won't mention their names here. These individuals have published a great many works, but when it comes to recommending them, I must say I cannot suggest these books, as I know the authors. I'm not claiming that these authors are either good or bad. Someone who cannot even enter a meditative state has no right to comment on the texts of the sage Vasudeva. Yet for some reason they offer their interpretations, publishing large volumes in lavish formats as an example. Of course, I do not advise such works to others, as I view this as a matter of responsibility. When asked for guidance, I advise people to read the works of Yogananda, the Bhagavad Gita, and so on. These are more than sufficient. After all, people rarely have the time to read extensively. Autobiography of a Yogi is a good starting point. Why not? These books reveal the fundamental principles for those seeking to understand Yogananda and the teachings of Kriya Yoga. They were written for this very purpose. However, when it comes to other traditions and systems, such as Tibetan mysticism or Buddhism, there are no contradictions with Kriya Yoga. The issue is that people often struggle to grasp this immediately. Our brain, with its neural connections, tends to hinder this understanding, leading the reader to separate Buddhism from Taoism. For example, which is better, Buddhism or Taoism? But the true understanding lies in seeing the unity within them. Taoism cannot exist without Buddhism and vice versa. Naturally, this requires development and understanding. Quick enlightenment can only be attained by those who have already accumulated the necessary spiritual progress in past lives. For them, something as simple as a dog barking can trigger a sudden spark of enlightenment. If this is not the case, one must cultivate their consciousness and understanding. It is crucial to read the works of realized masters, as they contain universal truths. I recommend these first and foremost. Then other books if you want to. There is no separation. Muslims come to my seminars, Christians attend them too. Some people ask, won't my faith dwindle? Through the practice of Kriya Yoga, you will come to truly understand the essence of what you are doing. Through the practice of Kriya Yoga, you will refine what you already love. This technique leads to God realization. But along the way, it enhances qualities that help you perfect what you have today. Ultimately, you will come to understand what true religion really is. That's the core of the matter. People don't fully understand what they are doing. I'm not speaking against religious figures. Rather, I stand for purity, morality, and responsibility towards people and above all, towards God. That's why I approach life with sincerity, letting go of things beyond my control. If there is something I cannot change in the present moment, I choose not to dwell on it. However, I am deeply convinced, and when I say I do not mean my personality, that everything that happens serves a greater purpose. It is not about asking why, but rather for what. This shift in understanding provides profound clarity. Now we have entered a phase where the light begins to illuminate impurities and evil, specifically the ignorance of consciousness. I'm not referring to duality, but to that ignorance that is becoming increasingly visible. Consider this simple analogy. If the light in your closet is dim, everything appears to be in its place, neat and orderly. But when you replace that dim bulb with a bright one, suddenly you notice the dust, dirt, and other imperfections that were previously invisible. Right? This is connected to our consciousness. The brighter the spiritual illumination, the more clearly we can see the aspects of ourselves that require attention and transformation. Today, books can guide you on your journey. I view them as a second teacher. If someone does not have a primary teacher, books can provide guidance. However, I would not recommend practicing Kriya Yoga solely through books. This is a serious discipline and requires live interaction. Books can inspire a life's purpose, provide direction, clarify concepts, shape the mind, guide our thoughts towards the divine, and teach us to recognize or attempt to perceive the divine presence. The Vedas exemplify this principle. They are not just information, they are a living wisdom that shapes our lives. They provide the knowledge we need to engage with and recognize the higher power that gives us life. Living by knowledge by the Vedas means practicing them, integrating them into our lives. I often say that Kriya Yoga represents the eternal, unchanging law of the universe that embodies the essence of the Vedas. All four Vedas combined, and even transcends them. Kriya Yoga is the key to the divine knowledge incorporated in the Vedas and transcending them. It is a science of experiencing the divine in action. This is the unchanging universal law that has manifested through action. Apologies for the interruption. No, it's I who should apologize. I wanted to add an important remark that books, especially ancient texts, can often take on the role of a guru. The Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, Buddha Sutras, all of these can serve as gurus. However, any book also needs a carrier. Returning to the concept of information hygiene that we've been discussing, it involves a conscious approach to choosing the information we consume. One effective method, if you have a teacher or mentor, is to seek their guidance. Naturally, this requires trust in the mentor. A trust that they are not exploiting you for personal gain, but instead aim to help uncover your inner divinity. It is entirely reasonable to approach your spiritual teacher, your meditation teacher, and ask, what books would you recommend? In this context, you can recommend certain books that you know and trust. Conversely, if you're aware that some books are not reliable sources, you can say straightforwardly, I do not recommend these books. This approach represents one valid method. While we discuss the importance of developing inner viveka as a personal filter, there are times when it is appropriate to seek guidance and reliable advice from a spiritual mentor. Sometimes I'm asked to provide a book list, and as someone who reads extensively, I encourage people to do the same. In our modern era, we also have access to educational videos that offer tremendous support. Interestingly, people today read more than in earlier epochs. These are my observations. But nowadays we have an advantage of being able to watch videos. Of course, there are books that I recommend, and it's essentially the same list. Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda, along with his commentaries on the New Testament and the Bhagavad Gita. When Yogananda was writing commentaries on both the New Testament and the Bhagavad Gita, he had a mystical vision, as you may recall. He was told, what you are writing now is not just commentaries, it is a new holy scripture. When I read Yogananda's interpretations of the New Testament, the Gospel, and the Bhagavad Gita, I feel that these texts represent new holy scriptures. These should form the foundation of a person's self-education. At the same time, when I engage with someone, I recognize that they have personal inclinations and tendencies. Some people may need to read The Secret Doctrine. Others might benefit from the biography of Sri Ramakrishna, or perhaps the writings of Sri Aurobindo. Sometimes individuals come to me and mention an author or a book that I am unfamiliar with. It's impossible to know everything, of course. In those situations, I either skim through them to offer a recommendation, or I simply say, look, if this book inspires you to feel more beautiful, divine, and creative, and encourages you to see the world as a wonderful creation of God, a space for your growth, then you've chosen the right book. If a book or a video induces fear or a sense of inferiority, that is a clear sign to avoid it. Unfortunately, there are many books and videos that work in this way. They are like chewing gum. When you start focusing on the negative aspects of existence, it's hard to break free from that mindset. Or rather, like smoking, once you start, quitting is tough. Yes. I observe the same among acquaintances. Unfortunately, people often begin watching one gloomy video after another, full of dire predictions. I have great respect for astrologers. Many of my friends are astrologers, and I frequently publish videos with their participation on my channel. However, some astrologers focus too much on apocalyptic themes. While I understand that they may be trying to engage their audience, this approach is frankly unethical. There's another point you raised earlier that I would like to emphasize. A true teacher always points to God, and this is more than just words. Any teacher will claim, I point to God. Any priest will say, I point to God. Any guru will declare, I point to God. On the surface, everything seems fine, leading their followers back to themselves. Yes, they lead people back to themselves. Why? Because they say God is in heaven and I am here on earth. Let's figure things out from here. But we live in a unique era. The 19th century brought Shirdi Sai, the 20th century Satya Sai, and the 21st century marks the era of Prema Sai. There are many potential candidates, and the discussions around this are extensive, too vast to explore fully here. Nevertheless, we are now living in an era where God incarnates in different forms. Satya Sai Baba, Shirdi Sai, or Prema Sai. This raises a question. Are there many spiritual teachers who speak of God but in reality point towards Sai Baba? This is a common issue, both generally and within the tradition of Kriya Yoga. It would seem we already have a tradition, so why should we look to another guru named Sai Baba? But Sai Baba is not actually a guru, he is a divine incarnation. Of course, this is not a guru from another tradition, and this is a very important criterion. Unfortunately, much confusion surrounds this topic. Looking at the time, I see our conversation is drawing to a close. Actually, this is an endless subject because, as I mentioned at the beginning, one can learn mantras and Kriya Yoga techniques and practice them diligently every day. But if the mind is filled with confusion, where will it lead you? That's why it's crucial to cultivate a clear viveka. If you have a teacher, seek their guidance. Even if there is no one you could ask, it's essential to develop an inner sense of discernment, knowing what is truly beneficial for your soul and what is not. Therefore, openness to everything is key. A spiritual practitioner or seeker always remains free, and sectarianism leads nowhere. Sectarianism may seem a reliable path to some people, but it leads nowhere. What is sectarianism? It's an unreliable path where everyone appears to move in the same direction, driven by a herd mentality. A truly spiritual person must embrace freedom, but freedom comes with responsibility. Yes, responsibility. Before your soul, above all. Yes, Satya Sai said, follow the master and face the devil. The principle of the 4 F's. You know them, right? Finish at the goal. Follow the master. Face the devil, and so on. Today, the devil exerts influence over people through information. You mentioned something vital, information hygiene. Allow me to make a contribution and expand on it. Practice what is known as information hygiene and eliminate the information hyena. It's actually quite simple. Retain hygiene, eliminate the hyena, and everything will be fine. This is just a play on words. We must fight to keep our minds clean, as they are constantly bombarded from all sides. By unhealthy food, misleading information, the energy transmitted by the food we eat, and so on. What we need now is purity and righteousness. The purity of intentions and thoughts is crucial, along with spiritual practice. It purifies and aligns everything as it should be. Sai Baba used to say, hold on to my feet tightly with all your strength, and everything will be fine. This isn't about blind or fanatical devotion. No. Holding on to the lotus feet actually means that one's head reaches towards heaven, towards God, the Creator, and our very essence. We seek to remain anchored to this presence through spiritual practice. So I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you so much, Imramji, for taking the time to share your thoughts, wisdom, and experience. Thank you for inviting me. As always, we encourage our viewers to leave comments below the video. We read all of them, sometimes responding directly, other times addressing them in future videos. Your comments allow us to continue this dialogue. This is one of the blessings of modern information technologies. Until next time, friends, cultivate your viveka. Be happy. God save you. Sai Ram. Sai Ram.